Good evening, I'm Nima, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, July 19th. Tonight, 4 major airports take a step back from paused travel precautions in hopes of detecting new COVID-19 variants coming into the country. Random COVID-19 testing for fully vaccinated travelers resumes today at the Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal airports. The mandatory testing will be completed either at an in-person appointment at select testing locations or through a virtual appointment for a swab test. All testing will be done outside of airports. Travelers who are not fully vaccinated must test on both the 1st and 8th days of their mandatory 14-day quarantine unless they are exempt. On the West Coast, fire crews in British Columbia are battling an out-of-control wildfire burning just west of the village of Lytton. The BC Wildfire Service warns that warmer and drier weather expected throughout this week could make it worse. Environment Canada says lower humidity will cause fuels to dry out. This will stoke the flames of the nearly week-old blaze that has already destroyed at least 6 properties. Meanwhile, in Manitoba, rain helped firefighting efforts in the southern half of the province. But new fires and heavy smoke in the northwest remain a concern. Moving to southwestern Ontario, where farmers are dealing with abnormally dry conditions that they say are making their crops suffer. Thorndale farmer Crispin Colin says he's watching some of his crops die of thirst, and he expects to see significantly lower yields for corn. He warns the situation will also create a domino effect in the food chain, creating less product and driving up prices. The University of Waterloo Weather Station reports last month was the driest June in the region in 15 years. Turning to a new report from the Senate Fisheries Committee, it's calling on Canada to fully implement Indigenous fishing rights, and it is generating some mixed emotions. The report recommends the government ensure Indigenous communities are included in governing and regulating the lobster fishery on the East Coast. This is an area that has seen violent clashes in the past 2 years over fishing rights. Mi'kmaq lawyer Rosalie Francis says she is very hopeful that the report will bring meaningful change. But the report has caused anger in communities among non-Indigenous industry groups that rely on the lobster fishery. Manitobans in the southern part of the province are being warned to prepare for heavy rain over the next 2 days. The province said yesterday that a weather system coming to Manitoba is expected to bring anywhere from 25 to 150 millimeters over a 48-hour period. The province says higher amounts of rain could create localized overland flooding. Back on the East Coast, Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston is reconvening the provincial legislature next Tuesday to stop a recommended pay raise for its members. The pay raise was recommended by a 3-person panel appointed on May 30th to review compensation levels for members of the legislature. Keith Bain, the Speaker of the legislature, said in a news release today that the panel has recommended a 12.6% pay raise for members. This brings their base salaries to just over $100,000 a year from about $89,000. Mr. Houston followed up with a release saying he respects the panel's work, but that his government will not be accepting its advice. Jail time has been doled out to former Parti Québécois leader André Boisclair. Once considered a rising political star, the 56-year-old Mr. Boisclair pleaded guilty last month to sexually assaulting 2 young men in separate incidents at his Montreal apartment in 2014 and 2015. Yesterday, a Quebec judge sentenced him to 2 years less a day in jail and 2 years probation. He will also be registered for life as a sex offender. Alberta Health Services workers will no longer be required to be immunized for COVID-19 as a condition of employment. The province's healthcare delivery agency says emerging evidence shows that previous vaccine doses, which met the policy's requirements, have become less protective against infection. However, it does say vaccines continue to provide strong protection against serious illness. Workers must still stay home when they're sick, wear required PPE, and practice hand hygiene. Canadian singer-songwriter The Weeknd has announced his makeup date for the Toronto show he canceled earlier this month due to major technical difficulties. The countrywide outage of the Rogers wireless network forced him to postpone his Rogers Centre Stadium concert, which was meant to kick off his After Hours Till Dawn world tour in his hometown. But the pop superstar has marked September 22nd as the night he will make it up to Toronto fans. Promoter Live Nation says tickets for the original July 8th date will be honored for the rescheduled performance. Forum Daily will be right back with a look at a study with a possible solution for hospital wait times. Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. A new report released today by a nonprofit think tank claims to have found a potential solution to Canada's healthcare waiting list crisis. SecondStreet.org points to a healthcare policy in Europe that allows patients to travel to other EU countries for surgery and be reimbursed by their home country. The reimbursements would be of the same amount that the home country would have paid for local treatment. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this healthcare policy and if it's realistic for Canada to implement is Colin Craig, president of SecondStreet.org. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Well, thanks for having me, Nima.
So we know that Canadian provinces already reimburse patients for a portion of their planned medical costs abroad. So tell us a little bit more about this system and how successful it is.
So you're right. It does happen in Canada, but it appears to be a very, very limited number of people that actually get approved. It seems to be a very rare situation when someone actually is approved for this. Whereas in Europe, it's the opposite. It's standard for patients to be able to go to another EU country, pay for surgery, go back to their home country, and then get reimbursed for what that home country would normally pay. So last year it was about 84% approval of applications for reimbursement in Europe, whereas in Canada, one lawyer from Ontario estimated that it was about 98% rejected in Ontario. So it's the opposite in Canada, and we think that if it was made a more standard procedure, it could help thousands of patients across the country get the care they need instead of languishing on long waiting lists.
Sounds like some significant differences between both systems, Mr. Craig. So what is the current state of Canada's healthcare waiting list system right now?
Well, we're in a crisis, and we were in a crisis before COVID came along. We've been obtaining government data showing thousands of patients each year die before they even get a chance for surgery. These are patients that could have had their quality of life improved if they had had hip surgery, cataract surgery, knee operations, those types of things. But even some cases where patients died while waiting for procedures which could have potentially saved their lives, so things like heart operations. So we're in a very, very tough spot right now. That's why we think it's time to look at outside-the-box solutions.
And what kind of steps can our officials take to implement a similar system like the one that's seen in the EU? And would you say that it's an easy system to implement, Mr. Craig?
Well, it would be very easy to implement once a patient has approval from the system that they need a particular type of surgery, whether it's a hip or knee operation. That part already happens. So once patients get to that stage, they could then decide to go abroad, get a surgery done at a facility that's qualified, of course, and then go back home and get reimbursement. And it's not just the patients that go abroad that would benefit. Every time a patient does that, those that are behind them in the waiting list get to move up a spot because now the government doesn't have to provide it using the public's system. So patients, whether you're traveling abroad or staying for the government, both sets would benefit from this type of proposal if it moved forward.
And I want to go back to your recent release on this. In it, you say that governments could also reimburse just a portion of these medical costs in this system. But how would that affect patients in terms of affordability?
Well, yeah, that's certainly an option. I mean, Europe does it one way. It doesn't mean we have to do it exactly the same way. So governments could approve a portion. And even then, that would still benefit patients because some patients right now are traveling abroad for healthcare. They pay for it privately, and that's it. They don't get any money from the government. Some look at that as an option, and then they decide, it's just a bit too pricey. Well, if the government even subsidized a portion of it, then certainly even more patients would decide, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'll pay for a chunk of it myself, and the government can pay for the other portion. So, either way, no matter how governments do this, I think that you would see less stress on long public sector waiting lists for surgery. And like I say, that would also benefit patients that don't decide to go abroad either, because they would then get to move ahead in the line.
All right, Mr. Craig, just about a minute left here, but how many patients' lives could be saved or improved by this new system, and who would qualify?
That's hard to say because it depends on the take up and how government structure it. But I think it's very easy to say we'd be talking about thousands and thousands of patients, because right now about a couple 100,000 patients at least every year voluntarily decide to go to other countries specifically for healthcare. So if there was some kind of financial support from the government on top, I think it's fair to say that number would increase.
All right, Mr. Craig, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. Up next, a look at energy security in Europe and how Canada can engage. Germany is reeling from major cuts to its natural gas supply from Russia, and lawmakers say the decision was made by the Kremlin to drive up prices. We'll have more on this story with an interview coming up next. Stay with us. Germany's biggest importer of Russian gas, Uniper, said on Monday that Gazprom sent it a letter which claims force majeure, events beyond its control, as the reason for past and current shortfalls in gas deliveries. The company had previously reduced gas deliveries through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany by up to 60% last month. The Russian majority state-owned company claimed technical issues, but German politicians say the decision was made by the Kremlin to push up energy prices. In Canada, the government has faced a backlash for its decision to send a repaired turbine for the Russian Nord Stream 1 pipeline back to Germany. Critics say the move will help support Russia's economy during the war in Ukraine. Well, with us now to discuss the issue of energy security is Dr. Heather Exner-Pirot. She is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. Ma'am, welcome back to Forum Daily.
For having me.
So let's start with an overview of the turbine delivery for viewers who may not be familiar with the situation.
Yes, these are essential in the functioning of Nord Stream, the pipeline that carries gas from Russia to Europe to Germany. And it was undergoing regular maintenance. There was suspicions that Russia would use it as an excuse to cut off. Obviously, they're weaponizing their energy sources to Europe and use it as an excuse. It was important to Germany that we return this turbine after it was repaired in Canada so that they don't have that excuse, which Canada did, suffering the backlash because it did violate our own sanctions. And now Russia's declared force majeure, so they found other excuses to cut off gas to Germany.
So what sort of reasons did the federal government give for sending parts back to Germany?
This is a difficult decision. This is not a black and white decision in that Germany needs gas, just like we all do. Germany needs energy and is very dependent on Russia. And how they got themselves into this situation, we can have a discussion on that. But in the short term, Germany, German economy, the European Union needs that gas. And so they need that Nord Stream 1 to be functioning properly. And they need Russia to be sending them that gas. So Germany asked Canada, I think, politically, this is a difficult move for Canada, but Germany needs it. They asked Canada, they're one of our best allies. The United States has supported it. Obviously, Russia or Ukraine is furious, though, because we are violating the sanctions. Russia is violating international law, is committing war crimes against Ukraine. And here we are facilitating their energy exports. So it's a very difficult decision. It's not black and white. I don't think it's a simple choice that the government had in front of it. And I can see both sides of the issue. But regardless, those turbines did not stop Russia from weaponizing their energy against Europe.
All right, Ms. Exner-Pirot, now, what do we know so far about the scale of oil and gas export profits for the Russian government, considering this war in Ukraine and the sanctions against this country?
Well, the important thing is that oil prices are up very high. Now gas prices are up very high, double, triple, quadruple what they were, say, 18 months ago. And so Russia, like Alberta, like Canada, is seeing a windfall. And this, of course, is enabling it to fund its war, last longer and kind of a war of attrition that's coming up. So Russia's benefiting in every kind of way right now. But in the medium term, in the next few months, those sanctions will start to bite. Right now, they haven't had the effect that we want to see. But in the next couple of months, when they do have more restrictions on what they can import, when they have their own maintenance to do, then there will be some pain for Russia coming up soon. But right now, they're still raking in the oil money.
All right, and bringing this back home to Canada, how can our country aid our European allies regarding their energy supply?
So the turbine issue is a short-term immediate issue. And the bigger question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we get into this situation where we were so dependent on Russia, where we didn't have any options, and what could Canada have done differently, and what can we do differently now? And so the number one answer is to get more of our product. We are rich in oil and gas reserves, to get that product to Germany, to get it to Europe, so that they can get off of Russian oil and gas, and so that they can still have a functioning economy, functioning industry, and be able to heat their homes at a reasonable, affordable price. So the answer is obvious, is that we need to get off of Russian oil and gas. We cannot transition, into totally renewable energy in this short time frame. And so Canadian oil and gas has to fill some of that void. And I'm hoping Ottawa starts to see it that way. We've maybe heard some whispers that they're thinking that way, but no concrete action yet.
All right, a quick 30 seconds left here, but do you think these steps would also enhance Canada's own energy security?
If we started exporting, yes, we have a tremendous, see how Russia is using their oil and gas to advance their political ends. And they have political values and ends that are not the same as ours. But we have that same amount of oil and gas. We could be using our energy to advance our own values and our own interests and being a force for good in the world. Instead, we've left everyone vulnerable, to these dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. And we're all reaping kind of the repercussions of that now.
Dr. Exner-Pirot, thank you again for an informative interview.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. The United Kingdom's national weather forecaster says sweltering temperatures are now a fact of life. This in a country that's ill-prepared for such extremes. The UK Met Office weather agency registered a provisional reading of 40.3 degrees Celsius at Coningsby in eastern England. That broke the record set just hours earlier. The unusually hot, dry weather has triggered wildfires from Portugal to the Balkans, and it's led to hundreds of heat-related deaths. Turning to the war in Ukraine, where Russian missiles have struck cities and villages in eastern and southern parts of the country. They hit homes, a school, and a community center. The regional governor in the city of Kramatorsk says one person was killed in an airstrike that hit a 5-story residential building. Russian forces also fired 7 Kalibra cruise missiles overnight at the Odessa region in southern Ukraine. The relentless attacks come as Russian President Vladimir Putin visits Iran to discuss a United Nations-backed proposal to unblock Ukrainian grain exports. Meanwhile, the European Union's executive arm has proposed earmarking 500 million euros for joint defense procurement. This comes in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the military aid that EU nations have offered to Kyiv. The European Commission said in a statement that the first ever such pooling of resources will avoid competition among member states for the same products and facilitate cost savings. EU nations have participated in a massive military aid campaign for Ukraine, and they want to quickly top up their own supplies again. The European Commission hopes to have the joint procurement system up and running by the end of the year. China says it will take resolute and strong measures if the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, proceeds with reported plans to visit Taiwan. Ms. Pelosi, who is second in line to the presidency, is due to visit the self-governing island that China claims as its own territory in August. This is according to a report in the Financial Times. She was originally scheduled to visit in April, but had to postpone after she tested positive for COVID-19. She would be the highest-ranking American lawmaker to visit the close U.S. ally since her predecessor, Speaker Newt Gingrich, traveled there 25 years ago. China has vowed to annex Taiwan by force if necessary. The Europe director of the World Health Organization is calling COVID-19 a nasty and potentially deadly illness that people should not underestimate. Dr. Hans Kluge says the current rise in cases is only going to get worse in the fall and winter months. The WHO says COVID cases have tripled across Europe in the past 6 weeks, which accounts for nearly half of all infections globally. Hospitalization rates have also doubled, and Dr. Kluge says it presents a huge challenge to the health workforce in country after country. The toxic chemical methanol has been identified as a possible cause of the deaths of 21 teenagers at a bar in the South African city of East London last month. Methanol was found in all of their bodies, and investigations are continuing to determine whether the levels of the toxic chemical were enough to have killed them. Methanol is a toxic form of alcohol that is used industrially as a solvent, pesticide, or an alternative source of fuel. Turning to Rwanda now, where officials are meeting in Kigali this week as part of the continent's first ever Africa Protected Areas Congress. This in a bid to expand the protection of land and marine wildlife. However, it comes despite little funding and the low quality of many existing conservation areas in the region. The United Nations estimates that just 14% of Africa's land and inland water ecosystems and 17% of coastal and marine areas are protected. Experts say climate change, underfunding for protected areas, and the infrastructure development in protected areas are hampering biodiversity on the continent. Italy's Art Squad police have stopped the potential illegal sale of a 17th century painting worth at least $2.6 million. The work is by Artemisia Gentileschi. Police say art merchants had allegedly described the work as being painted by a follower of the artist. This was in order to obtain export permission from Italian authorities. The celebrated Baroque artist achieved success as a female painter in the male-dominated art world of her time. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and make sure to follow our social media handles. We're available on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all of our commentary programming and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, thanks for joining us on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.